All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We are looking at a pretty wild, fascinating question today. What actually happens the exact moment our physical bodies just stop working? We'll be breaking down the concepts presented in the eternal law, exploring its very specific take on the immediate aftermath of life, the unseen dimensions around us, and the ongoing journey of the human soul. Imagine for a second that your life doesn't end when your heart stops beating. Instead, you suddenly find yourself hovering, looking down at your own body. So what happens next? Does everything just fade to black? Or is there a whole new set of rules you've got to learn? It's one of our oldest mysteries, right? Well, the source material we're digging into today lays out a highly detailed roadmap of exactly what goes down in those first critical moments. We're drawing our insights directly from Chapter 1 of The Laws of Eternity by Ryuho Okawa. Now, our goal here isn't to debate or endorse, but to objectively map out the architecture of the afterlife exactly as the author describes it. And this text dramatically shifts the perspective away from the fear and finality we usually associate with death, framing it instead as a continuous, eternal journey. Section 1. Beyond the physical body. The source immediately hits us with a stark contrast about how we fundamentally view our very existence. It really all boils down to whether we see our lifespan as a definitive end or just a single semester in an ongoing cosmic education. The text points out that the materialist view sees human life as starting in the womb, lasting a few decades, and ending permanently at the crematorium. But the spiritual view, which this book strongly advocates, argues there is a spiritual world where humans possess eternal life and undergo reincarnation. In this view, leaving the physical world isn't an ending at all. It's basically just graduation day before you move on to the next level of learning. Section 2, Waking Up After Death. Let's trace the actual chronological journey of a soul right after physical death. According to the text, those first few hours are filled with pure confusion. The departed spirit steps out of their physical body, but doesn't instantly realize they're dead. They look down, and it's kind of like, wait, there are two of me. They try talking to grieving doctors or family members, but they get absolutely zero response. And then comes the real shocker. They reach out to touch something, and their hand passes right through solid walls. The text highlights how incredibly startling this lack of physical resistance actually is. And this leads to what the text brilliantly calls the crematorium shock. A lot of confused spirits will actually hover near their physical bodies for days. It usually isn't until they follow their body to the crematorium and actually watch that physical vessel get destroyed that the reality finally sinks in. It's an undeniable shock, but it's required for the soul to accept its new state and get accustomed to these new spiritual sensations. All right, on to Section 3, the power of reflection. Once that acceptance kicks in, what happens next? Well, the soul doesn't just wander around aimlessly. The text explains that you're guided by numerous angels, these are high-ranking spirits, along with past friends and guardian spirits, to a sort of shelter in the four-dimensional realm. And here a profound process begins. You aren't judged by some terrifying external deity. You're actually judged by your own true inner conscience. You have to deeply reflect on your body-centered way of life on Earth. If you can honestly acknowledge your mistakes, repent, and realign, you're permitted to transition into the harmonious spirit world. Which brings us to Section 4, the truth about hell. Because this obviously raises a huge question. What about the people who completely refuse to awaken spiritually? What's genuinely fascinating is how the source redefines hell entirely. It's not some massive, divided half of the afterlife. Instead, it's described merely as a den of evil thoughts, nested within just a small corner of the four-dimensional world. It's a realm manifested purely by the mind. Because these spirits don't grasp the fundamental spiritual law that what you think becomes reality, their unawakened minds cause them to take on the ugly forms they imagine, like demons or animals. What separates heaven from hell isn't superficial precepts. It's simply whether or not one is aware of their true nature as a child of Buddha. The text shares a tragic plea commonly heard from these souls. If I have to be like this, just kill me. And this highlights a devastating irony. Since the soul literally cannot be destroyed, their punishment is their own eternal life. They're trapped in a torment entirely of their own making, suffering just because they refuse to understand their own spiritual essence. Moving to Section 5, recovering past life memories. Things look very different for those who do awaken. For those who transition to the harmonious spirit world, their awareness expands exponentially. The text explains that once you leave the dense physical world behind, your memory stretches backwards, and the higher your spiritual stage, the further back you remember. A bodhisattva can recall tens of thousands of years of past incarnations. A Tathagata remembers millions of years. And at the highest levels, great Tathagatas can remember all the way back to the dawn of creation itself. It really drives home the core message that our souls possess an ancient eternal life far beyond our current physical lifespan. Finally, Section 6, the path to evolution. This framework radically reframes how we look at death. It takes something we typically view with absolute dread and turns it into something natural and beautiful. The author uses this incredibly powerful metaphor, stating, "The transition from physical body to spirit is like a cicada shedding its shell or a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. By shedding that heavy, old physical shell, humans emerge into their true spiritual form. In a dimension where thoughts instantly become reality, souls experience firsthand that they possess the same essence as Buddha, feeling their power multiplied to continue on their path of spiritual evolution." So the big takeaway from this source material is that death isn't a dead end. It is the emergence of your true, limitless essence. Leaving the physical world is just a return to our unburdened home, preparing us for the next exciting phase of eternal growth. I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question based on what we've unpacked today. If your current life really is just one fleeting semester in an eternal school, what lessons are you actively avoiding in your body-centered life right now? What changes would you make to your mindset today if you knew for a fact that your consciousness was going to live forever? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the dimensions around you.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a really intricate, highly philosophical framework of existence, and it all comes from a text known as the Eternal Law. We're going to impartially unpack its esoteric cosmology, specifically focusing on its fascinating depiction of spiritual ascent and how it maps out the layered dimensions of the afterlife. It's going to be an interesting ride.
Right off the bat, the text we're examining today begs a pretty profound question. What actually happens when a soul finally sheds its earthly desires? Well, according to this specific framework, that shedding isn't the end of the line. It's actually just the beginning of a remarkable upward journey, a true narrative arc of the soul ascending into much higher, more refined states of awareness.
Okay, let's dive into this and map out our clear, six-step journey through this unique cosmology. We'll be looking at 1. The world of goodness, 2. Awakening the soul's joy, 3. Light of the spiritual sun, 4. Telepathy and purified love, 5. Suffering as soul nourishment, and finally, 6. The moment of guidance.
Our exploration today is grounded specifically in Chapter 2 of the Eternal Law. This chapter meticulously outlines the nature of what the author calls the fifth dimension. Keep in mind, we are stepping into a very specific, carefully structured spiritual framework here, one designed by the author to map out life, consciousness, and evolution long after we leave the physical world behind.
All right, Section 1, the world of goodness.
To really grasp the author's vision, we first need to understand the actual topographical structure of this afterlife. The text presents this really fascinating spatial model using the metaphor of an onion. In this cosmology, the fifth dimension doesn't just sit rigidly above the fourth dimension, like steps on a ladder. Instead, it exists as an enveloping, onion-shaped space within and around it. The higher spiritual dimensions literally encompass the lower ones spatially. Because of this, inhabitants of the fifth dimension can freely travel back and forth to the fourth dimension, since they are completely enveloped by it.
So, who exactly gets to reside in this encompassing space? Well, the text refers to the fifth dimension as the world of goodness, or the spiritual realm. And together here, the source indicates souls have to meet some very specific intentional prerequisites. They must actively abandon evil, awaken to their inherent goodness, which the text explicitly describes as recognizing their nature as a child of Buddha, and consciously choose a higher spiritual path. It is a realm entirely defined by spiritual intention.
Let's move to Section 2 and see how this builds. Awakening the soul's joy.
Once a soul successfully enters this new space, the text outlines a profound personal transformation. But to understand it, we first need to define what the author calls the astral body. According to the text, this is a subtle, physical-like body worn by souls down in the lower fourth dimension. You can think of it almost like a layer of clothing that mimics their former earthly existence, letting them retain human shapes and worldly habits.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core contrast between the two dimensions. You see, in the fourth dimension, souls are still clinging to this astral body and all their lingering earthly attachments. But upon ascending to the fifth dimension, they shed this astral body entirely. Without that physical-like limitation, the more subtle, true nature of the soul finally comes to the forefront. The text explains that up here, inhabitants find immense spiritual joy in self-expansion and improvement, specifically through helping others, bringing them joy, and acquiring vast new spiritual knowledge about the world created by Buddha.
Moving right along to Section 3, Light of the Spiritual Sun.
Okay, so we've talked about the internal state of these souls, now let's look at their environment. Upon reaching the fifth dimension, inhabitants become acutely aware of the spiritual sun. Now, this isn't just a giant glowing orb in the sky giving off light. The text defines it as the ultimate source of pure, life-giving spiritual energy radiating directly from the Buddha. The souls residing here feel this deep inherent gratitude for the continuous blessings of its light because they recognize it as the very metaphysical energy that sustains their existence.
Next up, Section 4, Telepathy and Purified Love. Now, what's really interesting about this is how these souls actually interact with one another. The text claims the entire concept of love completely shifts here. Because the souls have shed those physical-like barriers we talked about, their emotions become incredibly purified. This leads to a world of telepathic understanding. Feelings aren't hidden behind clumsy words or misunderstandings anymore. They are instantly, transparently, and directly conveyed from one soul to another.
In this state of absolute pure transmission, there is literally zero room for hidden earthly motives. If you feel love, it is felt entirely and truthfully by the other person. The book describes this as learning true, unconditional compassion, a love that is so pure it seeks absolutely no return. It represents a stark, almost night-and-day contrast to the conditional, highly transactional nature that so often plagues human relationships down on Earth.
Which brings us to Section 5, Suffering as Soul Nourishment. Now, this is where the text brilliantly bridges its grand heavenly cosmology right back to our earthly hardships. The source material makes a really profound claim here. It states that suffering is deliberately prepared by the Buddha as a whetstone and nourishment for the soul. And get this, the text notes that even up in these heavenly dimensions, sorrow and suffering still exist when things don't go one's way. It's not depicted as some realm of effortless, boring, static perfection. Actually, it's a dynamic space designed for continuous and sometimes very difficult spiritual evolution.
The author breaks down the mechanism of suffering almost like a psychological formula. It goes like this. You encounter a hardship, but instead of viewing it as mere misfortune or bad luck, you choose to use it as a whetstone to sharpen your spirit. This deliberate friction is what ultimately leads to a massive leap in soul progress. So suffering, in this view, isn't a punishment at all. It's a structural requirement for advancement.
And finally, Section 6, the moment of guidance. So, the crucial point is, what is the ultimate spiritual reward for all this intense evolutionary effort? Well, the author completely redefines our concept of status. According to the text, true nobility of the soul is never, ever found in living in a privileged, easy environment. Rather, true nobility is found entirely in the active, conscious overcoming of difficulties and handicaps. The struggle itself is what creates the value.
So how do we actually achieve this nobility? The text lays out a very specific approach for us. We have to view our adversities not as unfair roadblocks, but as literal hints for solving life's deeper problems. By accepting our destiny and choosing to fight our battles with a true sense of purpose, we reach a critical threshold. And it is exactly at this point, when we adopt this proactive mindset, that the moment of guidance occurs. This unlocks immense power and support from higher spirits who actually recognize our effort.
Which leaves us with a really powerful question to reflect on. How might viewing your own earthly challenges as hints for solving life's problems completely change your perspective today? Whether you view this text as literal spiritual truth or just a fascinating philosophical allegory, the idea of transforming our everyday struggles into a whetstone for personal evolution, well, it's incredibly empowering. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep growing, and I'll catch you next time.
Welcome back, everyone. Let's just jump right into it today. We are unpacking a truly mind-bending concept from the source text, the six-dimensional realm of light. We're going to break down the exact structure, the inhabitants, and the ultimate purpose of this higher spiritual plane. So get ready, because we're taking some incredibly complex spatial and spiritual structures and turning them into clear, fascinating insights. We're pulling our blueprint today straight from Ryuho Okawa's The Laws of Eternity. And what's so great about this text is how it completely demystifies the afterlife. You know, often when we think about what happens after we pass away, the concepts are just kind of vague or shrouded in myth. But here we get a highly structured, logical explanation of the dimensional universe. It treats the spiritual world not as some hazy dreamscape, but as a definitive, concrete reality with its own set of rules, environments, and evolutionary paths. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the realm of light, the spirits who actually live there, their quest for truth, the power of their words, and finally, the path to becoming an arhat. All right, part 1, the realm of light. Let's talk about what it physically feels like to enter the sixth dimension. The source text really anchors this abstract concept into a physical sensation that we can all relate to. It explains that the higher you go in these dimensional stages, the stronger the light actually becomes. It literally describes entering the sixth dimension as hitting a sea of light. Imagine driving out of a pitch-black tunnel on a blazing summer day right next to a sparkling ocean. Your eyes actually need a minute to adjust to the sheer, dazzling brightness of it all. Well, that is the exact environmental reality described for spirits arriving in this realm. Now, here's where it gets super interesting. This dimension isn't just stacked vertically. It actually spreads out horizontally, too, with some really distinct geographical environments. The text explains that the realm of light is essentially the front side, the main hub for humans who've evolved through orthodox paths. But there's also a totally fascinating hidden side. We have the Dragon Palace realm, which is deeply connected to water and oceans. And then we have the Tengu, or immortal realms, characterized by these harsh, mountainous landscapes where spirits train rigorously and display intense spiritual power. It's a vast, diverse geography up there. Moving right along to section 2, let's discover exactly who resides in this blinding sea of light. You might think this place is exclusively for ascetic monks who spent their lives meditating in a cave. But nope. According to the source, the sixth dimension is packed with everyday professionals. We're talking university professors, dedicated doctors, fair judges, and get this, even politicians and high-level bureaucrats make the cut, alongside painters and musicians. The big takeaway here is that elevating your consciousness through your specific professional expertise on Earth is a completely valid, highly populated path into the sixth dimension. So what ties a politician and a painter together up there? It all comes down to one core concept: usefulness. This source defines this as acting in a way that genuinely serves the world and advances societal progress. So a politician from the sixth dimension might guide politicians on Earth, or a departed artist sends inspiration to living artists. Think about your own daily grind for a second. According to this text, doing your job well and serving others practically is quite literally planting the seeds for higher spiritual evolution. It's the sprout that eventually grows into the profound spiritual love found in the seventh dimension. Okay, section 3, the quest for truth. Let's look at the intellectual driving force of this dimension. You can't just kick back and relax once you arrive. The absolute non-negotiable condition for existing in this realm is the rigorous, proactive pursuit of what the text calls truth knowledge. Whether you're an economist, an artist, or a scientist, you have to continuously seek to understand the deeper Buddhist truths behind your discipline. It is literally a realm of active, eternal studentship. Section 4. Let's explore the roles these knowledgeable inhabitants play as spiritual and societal guides. So here's a question for us to ponder. These spirits have the authority to command, guide, and inspire those of us down here on Earth. But where does that immense, soul-shaking power actually come from? It's certainly not political or physical power. The text uses this fantastic analogy of a compass pointing to the North Star. The direction of the Buddha, or the ultimate higher wisdom, is as fixed and reliable as that star. The leaders in the sixth dimension possess their power precisely because they are closer to this higher wisdom. They know which way is north, and they use that absolute certainty to confidently lead those below them who might be a bit lost in the dark. The really crucial takeaway here is that their power has absolutely zero to do with ego. It's entirely derived from aligning with that higher wisdom, the power of Buddha. And because of that alignment, they are able to utter what the text calls powerful words. These aren't just loud or commanding words, they are words so imbued with truth that they shake the very souls of the listeners. The source beautifully describes this as causing a rain of dharma, which manifests as genuine tears of emotion and enlightenment from anyone who hears them. Finally, section 5, the path to Arhat. Let's see how all of this builds toward the ultimate goal of the sixth dimension. So who or what is an Arhat? Essentially, they represent the absolute pinnacle of self-mastery within this realm. These are individuals in the upper stages of the sixth dimension who have completely cleared the clouds from their minds. They've finished their grueling self-study, mastered their fields, and achieved total self-establishment. In the text's terms, they are standing right at the gateway, the absolute precipice of the next dimensional leap. It's a really clear step-by-step progression. Step 1, you become an arhat by establishing your own intellect and usefulness. Because, let's face it, you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to have that foundation. Only then, in Step 2, do you prepare for true altruism. And that culminates in Step 3, crossing the threshold into the 7th dimension. The source identifies this as the realm of the bodhisattva, a world defined entirely by pure altruistic love and the burning desire to save others without any expectation of reward. I want to leave you with this really beautiful, provocative thought from the text. It describes every single human soul as an eternal traveler and inherently a rough diamond that only shines when we polish it through this continuous, multidimensional journey. So, looking at this incredible framework we've explored today, I invite you to reflect on this. How are you actively polishing your own rough diamond? How are you cultivating your own truth and usefulness right now in your specific profession and life to build your own path to the realm of light? Keep seeking that truth and keep learning. Thanks for joining me today. Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking some truly fascinating spiritual cosmology and concepts of love found in our source text. We're going to explore profound ideas about the afterlife, the intricate structure of the soul, and ultimately, how to find a love that literally never depletes. We're taking an objective, deep dive into Ryuho Okawa's The Laws of Eternity. And specifically, we'll be relying heavily on Chapter 4. This chapter outlines a very specific and honestly quite beautiful spiritual hierarchy. So to kick things off, let's start with a profound question that the text tries to answer. What exactly lies beyond our standard earthly understanding of love? I mean, we all know what it feels like to seek love from our family or our partners, right? But the source text challenges us to look much, much higher than our basic human instincts. To demystify this, we're going to climb a ladder of ascension. Our roadmap covers the 7th dimension, the dynamics of love, words of true life, antennas of divine love, and finally, the diamond of compassion. Let's get right into it. Step 1. The 7th dimension. Right in Chapter 4 of the original text, we learn that the 7th dimension is basically known as the world of love. But, as you'll see, the source is super careful to distinguish what kind of love actually governs this advanced spiritual dimension. It's definitely not what you might initially think. According to the text, this realm is also called the bodhisattva realm. Here, love isn't just some fleeting emotion, it's actively underpinned by a deep knowledge of spiritual truth, which the text specifically defines as Buddhist truth. The argument here is that love backed by profound spiritual understanding is literally the only thing that can truly give life, nurture, and develop everything in the world. You can really see this stark contrast here. Think about earthly love on the left, like parental or romantic love. While it's beautiful, it's often exclusive and, let's be honest, sometimes a little possessive. But on the right, 7th dimensional love is entirely focused on nurturing and giving life to all things, completely without expectation. Moving right along to Step 2, the dynamics of love. So, how does this actually work? Well, the author explains that those basic human cravings we have for love aren't a bad thing at all. They actually serve as stepping stones, a catalyst for spiritual awakening. The text states that love follows a profound law of action and reaction. Basically, if you give love unconditionally to others, you inevitably invite this massive, overwhelming love from the Buddha right back into your life. Step 3. Words of true life. The text uses a really vivid and kind of heavy metaphor here. Imagine thirsty, exhausted travelers wandering through a scorching desert, desperately searching for an oasis. That is exactly how the book describes humanity's spiritual state on Earth. People are just spiritually fatigued and wandering. And this brings us to the core of true salvation. Inhabitants of the 7th dimension prioritize saving people by giving them the word of life, this Buddhist truth, to completely quench that existential thirst. The source argues that providing the truth acts like spiritual water. Once an awakened soul drinks it, they can step out of that desert of confusion and live their eternal life without any hesitation. Which brings us to Step 4, antennas of divine love. Okay, I absolutely love this extended metaphor from the book. It says bodhisattvas act exactly like radio antennas. They don't just magically generate love out of thin air. Instead, they make the heart of the Buddha their own, and they are obligated to receive that boundless love and broadcast it endlessly outward, just like an antenna catches a signal and pushes it out to the world. This explains how historical figures totally transcended standard human relationships. The source specifically points to figures like Jesus and Shakyamuni, noting that they aimed to save all of humanity. They practiced a giving love that sought absolutely no return. To borrow another beautiful analogy from the text, they gave love much like the sun gives infinite energy to the earth, freely, simply, and without ever asking for a single cent back. And finally, step 5, the diamond of compassion. To reach this ultimate evolution, the source likens the human soul to a vast reservoir, or a dam. Your soul is quite literally a vessel meant to receive the love of the Buddha. Now, if your vessel is small, it overflows way too quickly. But a massive vessel, it can hold on to and utilize an incredible amount of spiritual power and electricity. So how do you upgrade your vessel? By practicing the truth of Buddhism, you actively expand the walls of your soul's dam. You are literally expanding your capacity to accept that divine energy. By doing this, you generate ever greater amounts of love, just like that dam generating electricity, and you elevate your soul directly toward Buddhahood. And this brilliantly illustrates the climax of the text, the ultimate sublimation into compassion. The text defines this not as a fleeting emotion, but as the love of existence itself. It is a state that just continues to give, unconditionally. Picture a flawless diamond. It simply shines by its very nature, not because it wants to receive light in return, right? A highly evolved seventh-dimensional soul radiates love simply because it exists. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative thought directly from the text to reflect on in your own life. How will you expand the vessel of your soul today? Can you find a way to shift from a love that seeks to a love that simply shines? Thank you so much for joining me to explore this source material and keep seeking that knowledge. Welcome to today's explainer. We are taking a pretty mind-expanding journey today, traveling all the way from the highest metaphysical realms right down to your personal purpose. We're going to be decoding the profound cosmology laid out in our source material, exploring how the universe is structured, how spiritual energy actually operates, and what this all means for the human experience. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the Tathagata realm, move into the true nature of light, deconstruct space and time, examine evolution and harmony, and finally, wrap up with the universal eternal law. Let's jump right in. To anchor ourselves, we're looking at Ryuho Okawa's The Laws of Eternity, specifically zeroing in on Chapter 5. This text basically attempts to compress thousands of years of spiritual perspective into one unified, logical framework of the universe. It moves past myth and legend to present a highly structured view of reality. Starting off with Section 1, the Tathagata realm, or the eighth dimension. We're beginning our macro to micro descent at the very, very top of this structural framework. This ethereal eighth dimensional realm is inhabited by the absolute most outstanding spiritual beings in human history. And look at this stark reality. Out of an estimated 50 billion spirits residing in the spiritual world, only about 400 reach this level. To put that scale into perspective, it's basically like finding a single, unique individual in a crowd of over 100 million people. It's the ultimate exclusive threshold. So you might be wondering, who exactly are these 400 individuals? Well, they are known as Tathagata. According to the text, a Tathagata is defined as someone who embodies absolute truth, referred to as Tathatha. They possess immense wisdom and come to Earth essentially as an educational representative, a proxy for the Buddha. Their monumental task is to explain the vast, boundless nature of the Buddha's will to humanity in a way that we can actually comprehend. Moving along to Section 2, the true nature of light, energy, and will. Let's look at the core element that powers this entire eighth dimensional realm. Here, the concept of light takes on a radically different meaning. The Buddha's light isn't just physical sunshine, right? It's defined as an active, energetic life force. It literally contains will, intention, and character. It's a wildly positive, creative energy. On the flip side, darkness isn't some opposing active evil force. The text argues that darkness is purely passive. It's just a negative phenomenon that only exists when something is actively obstructing the light. The source uses a really concrete metaphor to drive this point home. Imagine a massive, blinding 10,000 candle power light. If you place a simple rock in front of it, it casts a shadow. That shadow, that darkness, has absolutely no independent power of its own. It only exists because the rock is blocking the light's natural tendency to travel forward. This is exactly how the text frames the concepts of good and evil. Good is an active, existing force, while evil is merely the passive absence of that good. Which brings us to Section 3, Essence of Space and Time. We are deconstructing reality here. To understand where this active light actually operates, we need to completely unlearn our three-dimensional biases for a second. The text challenges us to ask ourselves what space and time truly are from a multidimensional perspective, especially from the vantage point of the fourth dimension and beyond, where physical length, width, and height just don't apply in the way we're used to. To answer that, the source reveals three essential building blocks of creation. First up is light, which we've established is that active energy. Second is true space, and space is simply the field where that light acts and creates phenomena. No field, no space. And third, time. Time is the necessary flow that allows the light to actually move and realize its activity. Without time, the text argues, everything would just be a frozen, floating mirage. So light, space, and time form the foundational trinity of the universe. Now for Section 4, Evolution and Harmony, Humanity's Guiding Principles. Okay, now that we understand the grand cosmology of it all, we can zoom all the way in on our own lives. Because humans are created from this light, the source argues our very reason for existing boils down to two interconnected concepts. The first is evolution, developing from the formless into something increasingly magnificent. The second is harmony, maintaining a beautiful, sustainable balance among all those newly created things. And true happiness, the source asserts, is found right in the middle of both. The text specifically highlights the breathtaking harmony all around us as proof of this design. Just look at the precise balance between plants, animals, and humans, the delicate equilibrium between the sun, the earth, and the moon, the rhythm of day and night, and the geographical split of sea and land. This highly organized environment isn't random. It's described as the ideal, perfectly calibrated stage for humanity to pursue its eternal evolution. Finally, Section 5, the universal eternal law, the system of truth. This is the overarching rulebook of the cosmos. The law itself is entirely based on evolution and harmony, and it gives us a really clear directive. True evolution isn't selfish. It requires us to take our personal progress, our individual evolution, and harmonize it by giving it back to society. Adjusting our own growth for the benefit of the whole universe is the very essence of the eternal law. You evolve, sure, but you evolve to elevate the collective. As we conclude this explainer of the eighth dimension, the nature of light, and the rules of reality presented in the source, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. If the universe is built on a foundation of active light, structured by a multidimensional field of space and time, and guided by the ultimate principles of evolution and harmony, how will you return your personal progress back to the whole? Are you ready to walk this path of eternal evolution? Thank you so much for exploring these incredible concepts with me today. Welcome back. Today, we're diving into a genuinely fascinating explainer of the multidimensional universe, specifically focusing on the framework laid out in Chapter 6 of The Eternal Law. If you've ever found yourself wondering how certain esoteric belief systems actually map out the cosmos, the soul, and all of human history, well, you are in the perfect place. So let's kick things off with a pretty massive question. Where do history's greatest saviors actually come from? I'm talking about the heavy hitters, the monumental figures who shaped entire eras of civilization. According to the text we're analyzing today, figures like Jesus, Buddha, Confucius, and Moses don't just randomly pop up on the timeline. The source claims they actually originate from a very specific, incredibly elevated, higher dimensional plane. In this explainer, we're going to unpack the deeply intricate cosmological and spiritual framework presented in The Eternal Law. Our goal today is to objectively map out its claims, taking what is a very complex, multi-layered spiritual topology and making it clear, structured, and easy for us to follow. Here's our roadmap for this dimensional ascension. We'll be looking at the ninth dimensional world, the seven-colored prism light, the functions of great Buddhas, planetary and cosmic consciousness, and finally, Humanity as eternal travelers. Let's start with part 1, the ninth dimensional world. All right, the text posits that this ninth dimension is essentially the realm of the messiahs, but, it describes them in a way you might not expect. We're not talking about human bodies here. In this dimension, the true nature of these saviors completely transcends human form. They exist as colossal, free-moving energy bodies of pure light and consciousness. They are totally unbound by physical constraints until they actually decide to manifest. And what's super interesting about this system is how the text claims these entities divide up the work. They don't just all show up on Earth at once. Instead, they manifest in precise cycles. We're talking thousands of years apart, specifically to build the foundational principles of human civilization. Depending on the era and what humanity really needs, they fulfill targeted roles. They're even capable of dividing or differentiating their massive energy to guide humanity without ever fully leaving their higher dimensional post. Pretty wild, right? Moving right along to part 2, the 7-colored prism light. This brings us to a brilliant visual metaphor the book uses to explain why we have so many different religions on Earth: the prism. You see, the text doesn't frame these diverse religions as competing truths. Not at all. Instead, it says they're just different frequencies of the exact same fundamental light. Imagine a single beam of pure light hitting a cosmic prism. It breaks apart into 7 distinct colors, and each color is perfectly tailored to the unique characteristics and needs of different cultures. This classification system is actually fascinating because it maps specific historical figures to these colored rays. The central golden ray of law and compassion, that's Shakyamuni Buddha. The white ray of love is Jesus Christ. The red ray of miracles is Moses. Confucius is over there managing the purple ray of order. And get this, Isaac Newton, yes, the gravity guy, is placed on this exact same tier, managing the silver ray of science and modernization. The green ray aligns with the harmony of nature, like Taoism and Shintoism. Oh, and as a quick aside not on the chart, the source also mentions a blue ray for philosophy, represented by figures like Zeus. It's like a giant cosmic organizational chart. Which leads perfectly into part 3, functions of great Buddhas. So, how do all these monumental figures actually function together? Well, the source uses a striking biological analogy here. It compares Shakyamuni Buddha's systematic network of teachings to the blood vessels of a human body. Jesus Christ, on the other hand, acts as the pump of the heart, pulsing the vital blood of love out to all of humanity. They aren't competing, they're literally described as different, incredibly vital organs working together in the same spiritual body. Meanwhile, Confucius acts as the architect of social order. But Moses? Okay, the source makes a jaw-dropping claim here. Moses is apparently tasked with using his miraculous leadership to resolve a massive realm of hell, a hell with a history stretching back over 100 million years. Let that sink in. 100 million years. Each of these figures has an absolutely colossal mandate. All right, let's zoom way out for part 4. Planetary and cosmic consciousness. We are now stepping completely beyond the human-adjacent realms. According to the book, the 10th dimension introduces planetary consciousnesses. These are vast entities that have never even possessed physical bodies. Locally, we have the sun consciousness, which actively promotes evolution, the moon consciousness, which governs grace and harmony, and the earth consciousness, acting as the ultimate nurturer of absolutely all living things. From there, the book lays out a mind-boggling dimensional ascension. We step outward from our planetary neighbors in the 10th dimension to a unified solar system consciousness in the 11th dimension. Beyond that, the 12th dimension of galactic consciousness. And finally, the 13th dimension, the macrocosmic consciousness itself. It's this massive, nested hierarchy of unimaginably large spiritual awareness. Bringing it all back home in part 5, humanity as eternal travelers. So, after zooming all the way out to the literal edges of the cosmos, the source brings the focus squarely back to you and me. It asserts that this entire staggering, multidimensional framework was constructed for one specific dual purpose: to drive spiritual evolution forward while simultaneously maintaining ultimate cosmic harmony. What does this mean for us? Well, within this expansive cosmology, humans aren't just insignificant specks. We are framed as eternal travelers. The text states that we are continuously journeying through cycles of reincarnation, life after life, explicitly in pursuit of spiritual improvement, navigating perfectly within the laws of this grand macrocosm. The book wraps up its cosmic roadmap on a really beautiful, encouraging note. It states clearly that everyone, literally no matter where you currently are in your journey, is a rough diamond. You possess an innate brilliance, an inherent potential for spiritual evolution, just waiting to be revealed and polished through your lived experiences. So I'm going to leave you with this thought. If we are all indeed rough diamonds, navigating a universe bathed in the seven-colored light of these saviors, what unique color are you polishing yourself to become? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep seeking that fundamental light.